All right, so we are now officially live for 3 hours of Jamstack. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie, and I'm a developer advocate for Nimbella, and I am very excited for the next 3 hours. For the next 3 hours, regardless if you are either a beginner with the Jamstack or maybe you've experimented with the Jamstack before and are just looking for kind of ways to improve your skills or for new projects to build, the next 3 hours will have something for you. So to get this presentation started, let's go ahead and talk about the agenda. Here's the agenda for the next 3 hours. First, I'm going to go ahead and give a quick little opening to kind of explain everything and kind of highlight the event. After I'm done talking, we are going to bring on our first session for Phil, who will be talking about the principles of the Jamstack. So basically, not only is he going to go over some of like the basics of the Jamstack itself, but also some of like the key features in which can help you be successful as a developer for creating and launching Jamstack apps and why you would benefit going with the Jamstack. Afterwards, after his 30-minute session and his Q&A where you can submit questions, I will jump on and talk about the building Jamstack applications that keep track of user state. So if you were building something like a chat application or some type of Instagram clone, or pretty much anything where session state needs to be stored, I will be showing you how you can actually build applications with that using the Nimbella serverless cloud platform. And the thing is, like, the application we're building, it's completely stateful, and it'll only be about 40 lines of code and 2 files. So you'll see just how easy it is to build those type of applications. After that, I'm bringing on Colby, who will be talking about building an e-commerce Jamstack application using Next.js and Snipcart. So once you get the fundamentals down of Jamstack and actually like building basic things, he's going to basically show you how to build a Jamstack app that will help you make money. So if you're interested in that, definitely stick around for that. And at the very end, I am bringing on Gift, who will be discussing static site generation with Gridsome. So if you're interested in getting deeper into static site generators, definitely stick around to the very end. All right. So that is pretty much the agenda. Now, before we go ahead and get started with Phil's session, I do want to do a quick little announcement. If you are interested in coding along with me, I would strongly recommend that you make an account at Nimbella.com and download the CLI. The entire process will take about 1 to 2 minutes, and it's completely free. So if you're interested in coding along, definitely follow that link and get started with the process of making an account. All right. All right, so real quick, before we get started with Phil's session, I do want to give a quick shout out to all of our community partners who were a part of helping us get the word out on this event. We've had hundreds of signups for this event, and that would not have been possible had it not been for the amazing communities who were kind enough to share this event with their community. So the first one I want to mention is Jamstack Boston. Jamstack Boston brings on speakers in areas of static site generation, the modern web ecosystem, web apps, and web hosting and performance solutions. So if you're interested in that or you live in the Boston area, definitely check that out. The next one is Learn to Code JavaScript in Charlotte. Based out in North Carolina, this is a meetup group for front-end devs of all skill levels to learn JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. And also a little shout out, the owner of the group actually made an interesting site called freecodegames.com, which is a website where you can test out your front-end capabilities daily with daily challenges. The next one is Van.js, or Vancouver JavaScript Developers. Van.js is a meetup for web developers in downtown Vancouver, and their focus is on JavaScript, front-end technology, and the open web. All right, last 2 partners I want to highlight. We got JavaScript Meetup based out in India. This meetup is for passionate developers who are interested in learning and sharing tips and experiences for the best practices in JavaScript and web development. They're a very large group and they're very active, so definitely recommend hitting them up. And our last meetup that I want to highlight is actually one that is very close to where the American branch for Nimbella is up in California. We're based out in San Jose, but this group is based pretty close to us in San Francisco. This California-based group has a regular lineup of speakers in areas of static site generation, the modern web ecosystem, web apps, and web hosting for performance solutions. So regardless if you live close to these areas or you're just interested in these type of technologies, definitely recommend checking these groups out. I'll post the links to all of them in the comment section. All right, so now that we got our community partners out of the way, let's go ahead and get our presentation started. So what I'm going to be doing is that I will be bringing on our first speaker, Phil. All right, Phil, how are you doing, man?
Hey, thanks, Jamie. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, and thank you so much for being the guy to kickstart this this whole conference and getting everyone started in the Jamstack.
Yeah, it's my privilege. It's great. Thanks for having me.
So for people that don't know who you are, why don't you go ahead and kind of give us a quick little introduction as to who you are?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Phil. I'm based in a little town called St Albans in the UK, just outside of London, and I'm part of the developer experience team at Netlify, who are a company very involved in the Jamstack space. I've been there for about 3 years. But before then, I used to work at an agency where I got very excited about static site generation and all things to do with static hosting and the blossoming kind of Jamstack in for a while. I'm very part of the Netlify team trying to build stuff there.
Nice. All right. So I'm very excited to have you present your session for the next 30 minutes. For anyone who has questions for Phil, definitely ask them in the comment section. I will be collecting them for the end of the session. We'll be having a 10-minute Q&A after he's done for his 30-minute session, and then we'll take it from there. Phil, if you'll do me a favor, if you'll go ahead and share your screen.
Yep. How is that? There we go.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it up to you. All right. You take care.
Thank you very much. All right. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining, first of all, and thanks for being here. And thanks to Jamie for having me. As he said, I'm going to start the session today, and I thought it would be good to start with a session which I've called Principles of Jamstack and How It Can Help You Win. Now, there's a couple of things, of course, we should unpack before we do anything else there. One of them, of course, is going to be this term Jamstack. I know that a lot of people here have been exploring the Jamstack space already. It's great to see community members from various Jamstack meetups around the world here and involved. I also know that there are some people on this session who either completely new or quite new to Jamstack. So we are going to talk a little bit about what Jamstack is, first of all. Hopefully that won't be too much of a repetition for people who know that already. But I also want to unpack some of the principles and some of the misunderstandings, maybe a tiny bit as well. But we should also talk about this word, the fact that I said, how can it help you win? That seems like a very lofty claim. So we should probably talk a tiny bit about what I mean by that as well. So why don't we get started and do that first of all? So what do I mean when I say win? Well, I'm assuming that there are people here on this section who are either practitioners building stuff for the web, or you're involved in making decisions about technical architectures. Probably you have projects you're working on, clients you're working with, maybe you're at an agency, maybe you're working on your own product. So for my definition of win is helping you successfully deliver your project without losing patience or hair. For those of us who are fortunate enough still to have some, mine's leaving me fast, but not because of the Jamstack. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I used to work at an agency, and one of my responsibilities there was trying to decide what the technical architecture would be on projects. So we'd have different clients arrive with different needs. Often they'd have their own expectations about what the stack would be. Maybe they'd have their own stack you had to work with. So trying to build a project within that stack can often be challenging. Trying to choose the right stack is also challenging if you got the freedom to do so. Often my clients in the past would say, what is the answer? What is the answer? What is the right thing to do for building the project? And as many of us know, there are many approaches to delivering websites. It's difficult to say this is the one answer. I often say it depends. And of course, we've got to design our solution according to what the problem is we're trying to solve. However, something that I'm always really keen to do is try and find a way to deliver projects which raise confidence in the process and lower risk. Those seem like obvious statements to make, but they often get lost along the way when we're planning things and trying to choose our technologies. Often we'll choose a technology based on what the client expects or demands. Sometimes we go with different technology choices because it's the best in class, it's reassuringly expensive, it's what the industry maybe has got used to. So I got very interested in the Jamstack because I found what I thought was a simpler way to deliver projects from time to time, where the profile of the project fit, that would allow us to raise the confidence in the process throughout the project, and also lower the risk of execution. So that's what I'm talking about when I say win, something that can help us do that. So let's return to this other phrase, this Jamstack thing that we're all here to talk about. What does it mean? Well, most of us probably have some kind of working definition that we feel is appropriate and feel is right. But I want to just unpick that a tiny bit. I really am keen on helping people to explain this to others as well, particularly if you're working within a team where you might be bringing this as your proposed solution. Being able to explain what it is and why you might want to use it is really important, and it's not always easy. So, what does Jamstack, the JAM, stand for? I'll be honest, I'm more interested in what it means. What does Jamstack mean rather than just what it stands for? So let's start with what it means. And this is the best definition that I think I've been able to come up with or encounter, certainly use very often. So what I think Jamstack means is fast and secure sites and apps delivered by pre-rendering files and serving them directly from a CDN, removing the requirement to manage or run web servers. So there's a lot of words in there, but really the key thing, and one of the principles we're going to unpack in a few minutes, is we're delivering sites by pre-rendering files so that we can deliver them directly from CDN. The CDN is, or a content delivery network, is often, or has often been seen to be like the reserve of very large projects who've got the budget to work with big CDN vendors. But that's changing fast, and so that's each of all of us now. So being able to serve projects entirely from a CDN brings a bunch of benefits, and we'll unpack those in a few minutes. So that's what I think Jamstack means. What does it stand for? Well, that's maybe slightly different. And the reason I do the second is because actually this can muddy the waters a tiny bit. Jamstack stands for JavaScript, APIs, and Markup. That's the JAM. And it's very easy to think that means that maybe Jamstack sites are entirely client-rendered JavaScript bundles. They can be, but they don't have to be. The key is more about in the meaning of pre-rendering and delivering things entirely from a CDN. Now, the reason that the name Jamstack came about is because JavaScript, APIs, and Markup have really been key technologies that enable us to do so much more with what we might have once upon thought of as static, quote unquote, hosting. But really, we can do a lot more than that. So a different vocabulary was kind of useful to help us talk about these things in a slightly different way. But the term Jamstack was coined by Matt Bielman and Chris Back, of the two co-founders of Netlify, to really help to push this dialogue along and have this descriptive term end up meaning a little bit more. I should also say that I've really bailed out of committing to how I write that. Writing it here in this kind of fancy font, all lowercase, has helped me avoid some of the shenanigans around how it was written. People who've been working in the Jamstack space for a while might have recalled some of the naming conventions that have been around here. I could also just fall back in this deck to just using block capitals, but some people might remember seeing it like this, where the JAM are really called out, enumerated there in the stack. I wasn't so keen on this because then some people wrote it like this. Some people really wanted to write, let's say it was a jam stack, so they'd write it like this. You'd see it sometimes written like this. Sometimes you'll see it written like this, like this. This I haven't seen. This I made up. Please don't start writing it this way just to troll me. But what I've ended up doing, and I think what the community is to embrace, is writing it this way, because this doesn't call out that it's JAM, standing for JavaScript APIs and Markup. It really just uses the term as you think a little bit about what it means rather than what it stands for. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. What does it mean and how do we use it? What are the benefits and what are the principles? We'll get into that in a second. So for the next 20, I can already see people in the comments finding other variations. I should have known that was coming. Okay, so for the next 20 minutes or so, what I want to do is I want to talk about the principles, talk about some of the benefits. There are many benefits, but we'll touch on a few. Then I'll quickly talk about some of the enablers, some of the things that have really raised the bar from what we might want to thought of as static sites to what we can now do. And then I'll reference a few things that take us beyond. And I'll show a little demo of something along the way. Just as a recap, Jamie did give me a lovely introduction, but my name is Phil Hawksworth. I'm a member of the development experience team over at Netlify. There will be time for questions at the end, but either at the end or during or any time in the future, if you've got questions about this, you can also find me on Twitter. I'm at Phil Hawksworth. So please do bring your comments, your questions, and your suggestions, but please don't suggest cab case for Jamstack, as I can see Colby is naughtily doing. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's start with talking about principles that I think are really important when it comes to Jamstack. I'm going to talk about APIs, and I'm going to talk about progressive enhancement. So the first one, pre-rendering. Now, I consider this to be the most fundamental and important principle of Jamstack. This is kind of where it started, and this is the one that really yields some of the most benefits. And when I say pre-rendering, what I mean by that, I know the term rendering and pre-rendering can be a little confusing at times. So when I say pre-rendering, what I mean is generating the markup and the assets in advance. Doing that not in response to a request coming into a server. So that would be what we call server-side rendering, where that's happening on demand on a server. Pre-rendering is doing it ahead of time, completely divorced from any requests that are coming in, generating your entire site so you can then put that whole asset onto a file server or a CDN that can then serve that for you. And we'll get into some of the benefits of that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the motives for pre-rendering other than what I just mentioned. So I think of it as doing the work now so your servers don't have to later. And that kind of decoupling from doing something ahead of time and doing it once rather than doing it per request is wonderful for things like scale. It means that we don't have to plan to have lots and lots of servers in our infrastructure and trying to imagine how much those are going to cost ahead of time, because we're doing work just at build time, so that things can be served much more efficiently later on. So that's a core part of Jamstack, pre-rendering things so they can be served much more simply later. I think of this as putting distance between the complexity and the user. So all of the things that might go wrong while you're generating all your site or generating a view that a user might want, let's have that go wrong in our build when we can see it and observe it, rather than go wrong when a user requests it. I love putting some distance between the user and the complexity. One of the things this can really do is it can really simplify deployments. Now, let me just explain what I mean by that a tiny bit. So here we've got a view of like a traditional web architecture. And I know this isn't completely right because of where the CDN and what have you is, but it's kind of illustrative. And hopefully by comparing this to a Jamstack architecture in just a second, this will also help things just become clear a little bit about what Jamstack is. But again, I'm trying to get that principle across of pre-generating things at a build step and then serving them simply from a file server. That is the essence of Jamstack. So in a traditional architecture, often what would happen is we'd have a request coming in from a browser there over on the left. And it would be probably not hitting a CDN first of all, but it would probably be hitting your infrastructure, probably hitting some kind of load balancer, that would then decide which of the web servers was going to service that request. And then the web servers would have things like templating and logic and other bits and pieces there, but they might need some data to satisfy that kind of view of the page that the users requested. So they might make a request to one of a number of database servers to get that data back, combine that to create a rendered view that then pass back up the chain. Some of those assets might be stored in a CDN for caching and performance reasons. So there's lots and lots of pieces there. And the reason I lay that out is because when we've got all of these different bits of infrastructure, when we're deploying our site and then making changes over time, we've got to make changes to all of these things. You know, a change to content might just go to the database server, or it might also include something that goes to the web server. We might have different rules for how we're doing load balancing. We might have different assets that are being cached at the content delivery network. We've got to figure all that out. So as we're deploying our projects, deploying our sites and maintaining over the time, we've got lots of places that we've got to do an update. I'd be curious to know if there's anyone here watching this who's had a nerve-wracking deployment process where they, hit the deploy button or start doing their deployment and hope for the best that everything is going to work and not being 100% confident. That's certainly the situation I've been in when I was working in this way. Conversely, for a Jamstack architecture, it looks a little bit more like this, where we've done all of our work at build time, and then that set of assets gets put wholesale onto the content delivery network. So when the users request the view of the page, they get everything. You can see straight that the process of is updating one thing in one place, and in its essence, that's the core of Jamstack. Doing that work up front and being able to put everything into one place so that when people come to request a view, it's there ready to go. So it's fast to serve and it's simple for you to build out. Okay, so that's one of the main motivations for pre-rendering, to kind of simplify this architecture, simplify this process. I also want to talk about APIs and services. This is really key as a principle for empowering the Jamstack. This view we just looked at a second ago, this diagram here where the browser's making a request to things from the CDN. The thing that come down the wire to the browser might include markup, JavaScript, and we might be using APIs in the browser to talk to things as well with JavaScript. This is being served at request time. So request goes to the CDN and comes back. That process is at request time. In build time, that's when our build happens, completely decoupled, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. But then when it comes to APIs and services, how do they fit in here? Well, this is a wonderful kind of attribute of the Jamstack, having the decoupled architecture, which means that all of the various data sources that exist out on the web, be that content management systems or product information systems or pricing engines or e-commerce services, we're going to see some of these kind of things later on today. Those can exist wherever they need to. And then at build time, we could be calling on those resources using their APIs, perhaps to populate our templates at build time with the right content so that then they're ready to deploy, or by getting pricing information, again, baking those into pages so they're ready to deploy. So interrogating the kind of services via their APIs is a core principle of the Jamstack. Another thing I should mention, since we're looking at how we can call those things at build time, is we can also, thanks to modern browsers and their fantastic JavaScript power now, they're really much more rich than they perhaps used to be, is that we can also make use of those different sources and services directly from the client using JavaScript and, again, using APIs. So this is a really kind of rich and flexible way of using various services and sources using their APIs, either at build time or at request time direct from different clients, or indeed both. And we'll talk about that in a tiny bit as well. It would be silly of me not to also include some talk of the ecosystem, since we're talking about APIs and services. This slide is actually a few years old now. I sourced it from this article that's referenced in the slide. This changes a lot because it's evolving so quickly. But the ecosystem around Jamstack, and by which I mean the services and the tooling that really enables this architecture, is growing all the time as confidence is building and building, and people are building businesses around creating services for this kind of architecture. So whether we're talking about kind of hosting infrastructure or back-end infrastructure, or if we're talking about things that live in the API kind of economy to do with things like search capabilities that you can use via APIs, or authentication, or content management systems, all of which are available as products as a service, which you can use via their APIs, or indeed all of the ever-changing tools that are available to front-end developers to be building out their sites that have different kind of ways of packaging the sites or running templating. Is evolving very, very quickly, and it's a very, very rich playground for us to get involved in. So that's very exciting, and it's a huge part of why the infrastructure or this architecture is becoming so popular. It's also worth saying that some of these services might be your own services. You know, you're not just bound to using services that exist as a product from other people. You might be using your own API, your own services, and you're decoupling that from the front end. And I'll show that in just a second. And then I want to talk about progressive enhancement as another principle of Jamstack, because responsibly using JavaScript in the client is really important. Now, when we're talking about using things both using JavaScript in the client and using APIs both or it's fine. Generate as much of the page as you can ahead of time and then embellish it later on. But progressive enhancement is a key strategy for doing that and trying to find the right baseline to serve statically first, which you can then enrich with JavaScript. That's a key principle. So I want to just call out that JavaScript APIs and markup, that's where the name came from, but you don't have to use JavaScript and you don't have to use APIs. You kind of need to use markup because you need to express something, but that's where the name sometimes can become a little confusing because pre-rendering is the most important principle. To illustrate that, I'd maybe show two different Netlify sites. This is netlify.com, which is a pre-generated site with very little JavaScript at all on the front end. There might be something for just noticing that you've dismissed the banner or for some form validation, but this is wholly pre-generated, this site. Whereas app.netlify.com, which is the admin for the Netlify platform, if you ever use this is also a Jamstack site, but this is an app shell that's served statically with React logic, which is also served statically, that then makes use of Netlify proprietary APIs. So both of these sites are kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum for whether it's a viewing site where it's basically just information that's pre-rendered, or what I sometimes call a doing site, which is more like an application. They have very different profiles. Some use APIs in the client and some don't, but they're all Jamstack because all of these things were statically pre-rendered, pre-generated, served from a CDN, and the API calls were made from the front end as necessary. So that's really all about Jamstack. So some benefits. Let's talk about a few benefits for people who might be new to this. I'm going to quickly talk about security, speed, scale, and experience, by which I mean developer experience, because I needed that fourth S. So security. First of all, we've got a greatly reduced surface area. So what do I mean when I say that? Well, let's go back to this trusty diagram again, comparing these two architectures. You can see that in the traditional architecture, we have all of this infrastructure, which we need to make sure that we've secured. There's logic that is being executed at all of these different points, even through to the CDN, and we need to make sure that those are secured. With Jamstack, since we're serving everything from a CDN, and typically that's read-only from the CDN as well, it means there are far few bits of infrastructure to attack, and it's a much simpler thing to be able to make secure. Far fewer moving parts to attack is the takeaway there. Speed, by which I'm talking about performance. So traditional stacks add static layers in order to improve performance, and by that I mean caching. So for all of this talk of maybe, well, Jamstack, isn't that just static sites? Static is a huge virtue if you're talking about making something static so you can cache it. So again, looking at this illustration, we might decide that, well, some of the views are rendered very often by the web server, so we'll cache those so they're ready to go. Some of the database queries, those are very common, so we'll cache those so they're ready to go. We'll add caching throughout the stack in order to try and speed things up. So we effectively pre-generate things and add them as caches, even through to the CDN, which itself is a large cache anyway. But in this model, we have to decide what can be served from there and what has to be dynamically rendered. With the Jamstack architecture, everything is served from the CDN, everything is cached. It's built by default to be fast. That's not to say that you can't make it slow. We all have to take responsibility for what we put into the client, into the browser. So you can certainly make anything slow, but in terms of the infrastructure, this is built to be fast. Scale, by which I'm talking about serving lots of requests. So traditional stacks add infrastructure in order to scale. So the way that we would scale up so that we would handle lots of traffic is we might add more web servers, or we might add more database servers. I've certainly been involved in projects where we've had things throughout the entire hosting stack, which is difficult to cost for, difficult to maintain. Remember, we've got to deploy things to all of these bits of infrastructure. Again, with the Jamstack architecture, everything deployed from a CDN, which is by definition built to be scaled across a global network. So you get the network benefits from that. Experience or developer experience or workflow, a productive workflow. I've already mentioned that, with this slightly simplified model, process of deployment is all about linking things to the CD. So that's you get lots of benefits for that. First of all, you're able to then start introducing version control for everything, because you're able to automate so much in this workflow. It means that as you're progressing your user interface, you can be building on a Git model and then choosing which of those bits of which build will be deployed to the live environment. And as we'll see in a few minutes, if we need to roll back, since everything is pre-generated and hosted from logically simplified architecture, rolling back to a previous version can be quite trivial. As we'll see later on, I think from Colby, we'll start to look at things like serverless functions for APIs. And with that, we can also start to build out workflows where the API and the UI are kept beautifully in step, both deployed at the same time through something like Netlify functions, which means that as you progress your UI and your API, if you need to roll back, those can be kept in step because you're building on top of a Git model. Again, we'll show that. I just want to talk about it briefly before I walk you through an example. And then some enablers. I'm going to go through this quickly just in the interest of time. But critically, the ecosystem, which I've mentioned already, automation and events have been huge enablers to elevate what we might want to have thought of static sites to really to be this Jamstack category now. So the ecosystem, I already showed this slide of all of these providers who are starting to elevate what we can do. Those are tools that we as developers can leverage very, very quickly rather than having to build our own for all of those. Automation. As we'll see in just a second, we're so much more likely to be able to automate things when the deployment model is simplified. Automating a build script running, generating an asset and putting it somewhere unlocks all kinds of doors, especially when we start to trigger those builds by different events. And things like webhooks and APIs can really unlock that so that things can be built based on events happening in all different parts of the ecosystem. Okay, so just to illustrate that a tiny bit, I'm going to quickly just step through a site that I've demoed to places before, but I just want to talk about a few things here. So this is Virtual Lollipop. It's a site which is a Jamstack site. It's hosted on Netlify. It's a static, quote unquote, static site, but it has some serverless things behind it. This is a site that will allow you to make some user-generated content, which is often a bit of a ceiling when you think of what we once called static sites. Allows us to make user-generated content, and which gets a URL. So here I am making a lolly page. Think of it like a tweet, but sugary, where I'm choosing some colors for the lollipop. that I'm making, or a popsicle if you're in the US, and choosing some colors, which is obviously the most important thing. And then I'm making that, and I should get a view of a lolly that I can share. There we are. Here's a view of it, and there's a URL I can share with anyone that they could go and get a view of this. Now, what's happening behind the scenes is, oh, look, a deployment has happened. Now, this has been triggered by an event. That event was me publishing that form. Because if this is a site which is pre-generated as it is, then that build will take a little while to run. This build takes about 45 seconds to run, although I've somehow got a view of this page already. And that has happened because I'm leaning on serverless functions in the background, and I'll show how that works. But if I go over and watch the deploy happening, various things are happening. I'm doing an incremental build based on the data I need to now build out. Behind the scenes, that data is being stored in FaunaDB, which is a wonderful service that I can now leverage. The site generation runs, creating the new lollipop page, which will then be served on a URL. And if I go to that now, there it is. It's being served statically. So this has been served statically. Now the build is finished. Whereas the view that the user got immediately was served by a serverless function, which is happening on demand because there was no static asset there to serve it directly. So already we're seeing a few different things arriving together here to make this happen. We had the event that kicked off this deploy. We got the automation that happened that ran this deployment that triggered. And since we've got this kind of a model, you can see here I am stepping back through all of these different builds. These all live on in perpetuity because of the Jamstack model. In fact, if I scroll way back to the start of time, well, the start of time for this project, which was July 2019, now I see any of the previous builds that's on in August of last year. Snazzy title font was my deploy, my commit. And again, since we're building on this Git model and Git actions are what trigger the deployments, we can actually see what the changes were that triggered this. So here we are. I can see the code that I added that brought about this deployment. I can even go and see the deployment itself. Again, because when it's a pre-generated asset, it can live on the web server forever. Now, we moved along a little way from here, but you can see my work in progress, and I'm not ashamed to show it to you because that's building out the steel thread and making things happen. But the nice thing is that should I wish to, on this deployment, if I wanted to roll back to that version, I'll probably be unlikely to do it. But well, let's do it. Let's do it now for the sake of proving a point. You know, all of the build is here. The assets are still on the CDN. If I wanted to, I could publish that deploy, hit publish. And now when I go to vlolly.net, I recorded this earlier today, so it won't be the same for you. But now if I go to vlolly.net, my old version has been propagated to the content delivery network. I'm now serving an older version. So rolling back from mistakes is key. And here we are, we have an opportunity to do that. I'll quickly go back to the latest version. Again, publish this deploy. Hit publish, and we're back to where we were before. So let's refresh that. Boom. Okay, we're back. So a lot of things are happening here. You know, we've got serverless functions doing renderings. We've got an incremental site build that's flushing out to a global CDN. We've got all kinds of things happening with automation and events firing those automated builds. And the reason that's possible is because the deployment model is so simple. Run a build, get some assets, put that on the CDN. When you start with that as the building block, you can embellish that with all of these other services and features to do all kinds of interesting things along the way. Run short on time, so I'm going to show you a couple of things very, very quickly. The reason that we're starting to be able to do more dynamic feeling things here is because of some of the bits and pieces like logic we can now run at the CDN right on the edge network. So here are some bits of configuration from that site. This is a rule that says, you know, whenever any path on the site, if it is a 404, if it's not found because we've got nothing rendered, render this 404 page. Simple enough. We're a custom 404 page, but it's the same kind of rule there that also allows us to say anything that wasn't found on the lolly path. So lolly.star. If there's something rendered, a file that exists, we'll serve that. If not, we'll resolve to this URL instead. So behind the scenes, we'll call that serverless function and render something on the fly. We can, which gives us this kind of page. We can even do things like set different conditions on our CDN network. So whether we want to do detect the country of origin of the request or even the language, we can route traffic differently there. So here, if anyone is accessing the site from the US, I serve them instead from the root domain from a /US page, which turns lolly into the word popsicle. I've generated a version of the site where popsicle is the language, the call to action all match. The same URL resolves to virtual popsicle and the same message. We can do all kinds of things. So it's a very, very quick tour. 30 minutes goes quickly. I'll just call out a few things to think about for going beyond this. You know, at the heart of Jamstack is this notion that Aaron Swartz popularized nearly 20 years ago. He said, bake, don't fry. And he's talking about building things advance so that you don't have to build them on demand and save yourself the headache of the complexity. It's very much returning to this ask for stuff and get stuff model, which is very conceptually simple to understand. But we can extend and we can enhance that now. You know, we can enhance that with serverless functions, which really adds another level of what we can do without ever having to maintain a server. And start to control logic at the edge, like those redirect rules I just showed, and which we can start to do even more with at the moment. We can do more and more with services, whether those are CMSs or pricing engines or a whole load of other things. We'll also see great static site generators that are starting to get more and more popular. And I know that GIF's going to talk about some of that shortly. And we can do so much more with the expanding abilities of the browsers. Modern browsers have incredible APIs that we can leverage with JavaScript. So we're able to do much more and more. So I think it's really exciting. The fundamentals of principle of Jamstack really is about pre-generating as much as you possibly can. But with all of these tools at our disposal, we can then enhance that and extend it even further, doing exciting things in the browser. That's it from me. I'm a few minutes over. I'm sorry, but hopefully that won't have eaten too much into our question time. So yeah, I'm really very, very happy to take any questions there are that came up while I was talking, and see where the conversation takes us. So you can also get some definitions of things and learn more and get access to other resources at jamstack.org. That gets updated with courses from lots of people, including folks who are on this call, I think. So that's it for me. Thanks very much. Jamie, back to you.
Phil, hey, that was a fantastic start to this conference. Thank you so much for doing that.
You bet.
So we do have like 3 questions collected from people who have specifically requested you to answer them. Mm-hmm. So we got the first one. We got how to get started in the Jamstack, which is a pretty general question for beginners.
No, that's a great question, because I talked about a lot of things that feel really complicated. It's worth remembering that the simplest Jamstack site is an index.html file that you serve from somewhere. So if you can write an index.html file with hello world in it and deploy it somewhere, then you're already getting started on the Jamstack. So I would be sacked probably if I didn't say the simplest place to do that would be on Netlify. And certainly you can go to netlify.com to do that. But between us, there are lots of places you can do that. You know, whether that's doing it on AWS or using Surge, or frankly, I think the first place I used was GitHub Pages. There are lots of places that can serve a static set of assets for you. And so an index page deployed to any of those places is the first step down the Jamstack route. I would particularly encourage you to explore services that build on top of Git integrations. I didn't show you how that works on Netlify, although you saw some of the results of that. But having a Git repository on GitHub that has like a simple build running in it, which might just add data to templates and output a page, it's actually quite simple to stitch that together with a service like Netlify or some of the other popular ones around, to start seeing the benefits of that workflow, where you deploying with commit add and pushing a commit change to Git. It just feels wonderful. It feels like you're on stable ground and there's no more dragging things around in FTP windows. You've got a great audit trail. So that's where I would start. exploring a service such as Netlify and looking at how you can use that to deploy either a template or a simple index.html file.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy when you think about like literally just a .html file, send it out somewhere, you're good to go. Like you think about like how complex like other stacks can be, and you're like, okay, this is when I was first learning programming. That's wild to me.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't get complacent about how much power there is in an HTML file. An HTML file that then you embellish with some CSS and like just a dusting of JavaScript if necessary. You can do a lot with it, particularly if you can automate the generation of that page. You know, I've built another example of like a comment engine, which is entirely static HTML. It has a form that posts to Netlify, which then triggers a build, bake the content of that form into the next rendering of the page. So you can do all kinds of things that feel very, very dynamic, but it's automation and triggers that lots of services now are really doing a good job of, that just elevate an index.html page or an HTML page to do all kinds of great things. So I'm a big fan of bog standard, boring markup. It can do wonderful, wonderful things.
Nice. Well, I think we got time for one more question.
Okay.
And this is a pretty bold question.
Okay.
So, is Jamstack the future of the web?
Ooh, yeah. No, I'm sorry. I wouldn't just leave it like that.
I was like, he's going to do that to me, man. No.
No, I'm sorry. I would never do that. I think it has a huge part to play in the future of the web. I think it really does. I think you never know what's going to come down the line. You never know what our user experiences are that we demand. But I would certainly say that you can do so much more with this architecture than you would imagine. There is so I've been deploying databases and an infrastructure for my blog, which is read often, write very rarely. There's no need for that. There's so much we can simplify this way. So I think we'll start seeing Jamstack architectures being used for more and more different things around the web. So I think it is a really critical part of the web's future. But who knows when web VR is doing its thing, how far we'll go, I don't know. But certainly I think it's a critical part of the web's future for sure.
Well, hey, you know what? That's a fantastic answer, and thank you so much for, taking the time to, sit down with us and go over your whole presentation and really kickstarting this whole thing off on a great start.
Great. Oh, thanks ever so much. Well, it was a real pleasure, and I'm excited about the talks to come. I'll take a look. I was trying to keep an eye on the questions as they were coming in. I'll certainly take a look at that. But yeah, once again, if people have other questions for me, at Phil Hawksworth on Twitter, always very excited to talk to people and answer questions if I can. So thanks so much, Jamie, and thanks for having me.
All right, you take care, Phil.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
All right. So that was Phil with his first presentation about the principles of the Jamstack. So before I go ahead and begin with my 30-minute session where we'll be building a stateful Jamstack application, I want to give a quick shout out to a presentation that we're going to be doing tomorrow. So tomorrow on our YouTube channel, we will be streaming about our Netlify add-on. And I know Phil went a little bit into Netlify itself. We actually collaborated with Netlify not too long ago to build an add-on to be able to give Netlify users the ability to use more languages, have longer runtimes, have built-in stateful API capabilities automatically come in. So if you enjoy deploying to the Netlify CDN, but you want more languages options and runtime options, then definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel for tomorrow for November 24th, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you can check out how to actually build applications using our Netlify add-on. All right. So now I got that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our presentation. So this presentation is called the Stateful Jamstack, building Jamstack apps that are stateful. And if you're not familiar with the term stateful, promise I'll give you a quick introduction in the middle, somewhere in the beginning of this session. All right. So before I begin, I'll go ahead and give a quick introduction to myself. My name is Jamie. I'm fairly active on Twitter. So if you want to follow me there and stay in touch, you can follow me at Jamie Dawson Code on Twitter. I'm a developer advocate for the Nimbella, which is a serverless cloud provider, which is also hosting this event that you're watching. Previously, I was a developer advocate for Samsung for the Bixby Premier Developer Program, and I was also an after-school teacher for I was a teacher for an after-school program called Code for Fun, where I taught K through 12 students how to program in Python and JavaScript. And I'm also I am a serverless and React dev. And if you ever want to kickstart a conversation with me, send me your recommendations on Twitter for any anime, scary movie, or experimental music you're into. Any three of those options will probably kickstart a pretty fun conversation with me. All right, so who is this conference for, or this workshop for? This workshop is for developers who want to easily build Jamstack applications that are stateful with no configuration. And it's also looking for developers who are maybe looking for a simpler solution to the cloud, like maybe you've tried to use like other type of services and were maybe kind of overwhelmed by the learning curve. I'm hoping to show you that deploying code to the cloud does not have to be complicated. Also, yay for teachers. Thank you, Henry. All right. So what to expect for this workshop? So to expect for this workshop, you will know the difference between stateful and stateless applications. From there, you're going to build your own stateful API, and then you're going to connect your stateful API to your front end, and then you will deploy your front end and your stateful API to the cloud. So before we go ahead and even get started with the code, let's talk about the difference between a stateless and stateful application. So what is a stateless application? Well, a stateless application is where the session state is not stored. A pretty good example of a stateless application would be a blog that someone runs where the blog owner doesn't really give people the ability to like post or comment on them or anything like that. Literally, the site, it just exists. You can go there, you can read the content that was generated. That is a good example of a stateless application. A stateful application is an application where the session state is stored. A good example of that would be something like a photo sharing site, such as Instagram. On Instagram, you create an account, you upload photos, and every single time you successfully upload a photo, you are manipulating the state of the application. And it doesn't matter if you turn the Instagram app on and off, the state of the session is stored. Same goes for Discord or pretty much any type of other messaging board you might be a part of. The way it works, you provide the text, you submit it, and it doesn't matter if you or any of the other users or even the Discord admin were to turn off their Discord and turn it back on. The text you submitted will be stored, and thus the state of the application was stored. Some pretty good examples of what we can actually do with state. We actually have a few demo apps at Nimbella.io. We have a chat application which keeps track of user accounts and also being able to upload text. We have a dummy. We have a fake stock trading app that actually interacts with an API, so you can pretend to buy and sell stocks and keep track of the stocks you're buying and selling. And we also have an OCR application where you can drag images with text into this field, and it will read the text on the pictures itself, and it will give you the ability to click a button and read and actually hear the text out loud. Those are just a handful of demo apps that we have at Nimbella.io. I'll be sharing this link at the end of this workshop so you can take a look at those demos. Okay, so let's talk about stateful with serverless. Well, it seems pretty straightforward. You should just take whatever you want and store it into the serverless API. Well, the problem is that with serverless functions is that they work when called upon. They're not like a regular thing where just running 24/7. The thing is, in order to actually be able to keep track of session state, you typically need to be able to have some type of third-party service to connect to it in order to be able to actually keep track of the state. Well, thankfully with Nimbella, we actually have that option that is that comes with for you natively. One of the ways that we do that is that with Nimbella, we use a built-in key value storage called Redis that could be instantly called upon with just like 2 lines of code. And you will actually be writing those 2 lines of code here in a bit. So it's pretty straightforward the way it works. Like, let's say you were storing like the users that were like coming onto your website. Well, what you could do is you could just have like, the key of user 1 set to the value, which would be my name. And then if another guy signed up, he'd be key of user 2, and that'd be set to David. And so if I ever wanted to like, find specifically like a certain user, I could go into my key value storage and be like, hey, find me user number 3, and it would extract the value of Matt. Another really great example of how to use key value storage would be if you wanted to keep track of how many users are actually coming to your website. Well, a really straightforward way of doing that is that you would first, once the user visits your website, what I would do is I would have a basic JavaScript run a fetch command that would call upon the URL for my stateful API. From there, the stateful API would realize, okay, I just got triggered. I need to go into the page. I need to look into the page visits value, and I need to increment it by 1. Now that I've incremented it, I need to return it to my web page. And so whatever value that is, whether it's the first time you visited or like you're the 1,000th person who's seen the page, that number will be sent back to your web page, and it will generate within a div. So, and this circular process happens every single time either you visit the page for the first time or you refresh it. So what does that actually look like? Well, it looks like this. Simply put, it's just like kind of what we were talking about with Phil from the previous discussion. It's just like an HTML page. It's about maybe 35 lines of code, give or take, for the front end. And then this div right here, what that's doing is that when the fetch runs the code to get the API, it returns this value. So, so now that you have seen like what serverless functions are, or now that you know what stateful applications are, and I've actually seen like an example of how to work with them, we're going to go ahead and build this exact application and get it deployed to the cloud. So if you have not made an account with Nimbella.com just yet, the only thing you're going to need is to be able to actually do that. I'm posting the link right now in the chat. This link right here will be able to have you get sent to Nimbella.com to be able to make an account. And then from there, you will download the CLI. The CLI is what you'll be using in the command line to be able to run commands into your code to be able to start deploying code to the cloud. All right. Let me go ahead and go and share my screen real quick. Sorry about that. Just got to go ahead and make sure I can share properly. All right. So when you actually follow this link, all right, get that fixed. Sorry about that. Having some trouble with the screen sharing capability. All right. There we go. So when you actually make an account, when you make an account, you will see 2 things. You will see the section where you need to download the CLI. So you click this button right here to be able to go to the Nimbella CLI. We have options for Mac, Linux, and Windows. So what we're going to be doing is that we will You have the option to download whichever CLI you need. That process will take about a minute. And then once you're done with that, you will need to go here, and you will see this command, this nim auth login. What that command is going to do is that it's going to give you the ability to log into your namespace so that you'll be able to actually connect to your namespace and deploy either your front end or your serverless APIs, whichever, to the code and interact with them. All right, so now that we got that, let's go ahead and show you how to get started actually coding in the cloud. All right, awesome. I'll leave this up in case someone leaves questions. All right, so the first thing we need to do is that when you go into your namespace or go into your command prompt, you're going to need to go ahead and create a project template to be able to start adding code to it. So to do that, just type in nim project create. And then I'll give it the name, let's call it test3. Yeah, why not? So what this has done is that it is telling the CLI Nimbella, or Nim, that I want to create a project. And then you would give it the name test3. And so that went ahead and created it. So now that we got that, we can go ahead and get started actually adding code to it. So I would go into whatever code editor you'd like, and we can go ahead and get started coding. So before we go ahead and get started coding, I want to basically show you just how simple this layout is. When you generate the template itself in Nimbella, you get two folders. You get a packages folder where you will be creating your serverless functions, and then you have your web folder where you'll be creating your code for your front end. So let's go ahead and get started with that. The first thing you want to do in the web is do index.html. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm kind of going to go ahead and kind of cheat here a little bit because we only got 30 minutes. And honestly, if you're at this point with the Jamstack, I have faith that you will be able to do basic HTML. So I don't really think that we should turn this into a HTML course. I got faith that you guys will handle that just fine. So what I'm doing now is that I am posting a link to a GitHub link where I have had some pre-generated HTML that we'll just use for our front end. Let me go ahead and zoom in. All right. Awesome. So what this is going to be doing is that this is going to be we're going to use this code for our front end. And as you see, the HTML is pretty straightforward in case you need a refresher. It's got the basic stuff you need to get it set up. I created some basic CSS for the divs because I wanted it to look a little nicer. I have script right here where we're going to be adding a JavaScript, and I got these two divs right here which will be generating the text on the screen. So once you go ahead and copy and paste that into your index.html file, which, by the way, make sure that is in the web folder, otherwise it won't read it, just run the command nim project deploy period. And that, of course, the period is assuming that you're actually in the directory itself. If you were outside of the directory itself, you would need to actually type out the folder path in order to actually be able to deploy that application. So you're going to see two things. You're going to see that you will get a secure domain, which is where your front end was deployed. If this folder right here was empty, you wouldn't be seeing that. You would only see the actions that got deployed, which we currently have in here, which we'll get to that in a minute. But let's take a look at our front end, see what we got. All right, so as you can see, if you're looking at this right now, you have now successfully deployed your front end to the cloud. This is, of course, assuming, if you've never dealt with cloud technology before, this might be, this is the first time you've probably done it. And and the cool thing about this, you can take this secure domain, you can share it with other users, and they will be able to see this in the exact same way you do. So now that we got that, let's go ahead and actually build out some JavaScript so that we can start dealing with functions in the cloud. So to do that, we need to go ahead. The first thing we need to do is that we need to be able to call upon the URL for the serverless function that we're calling upon. So what I want to do is that I want to extract data from this pre-made serverless function that we have, this hello.js. Now, taking a look at this code right here, you see it's very straightforward. It's literally just pretty much like a hello world function written in JavaScript. You can pass in arguments. So it'll either be, whatever argument name that you pass into it, and it'll say hello name, like hello Jamie, or it would just say hello stranger. And then from there, it returns a JSON object with a body and with the value of greeting, which is whichever this text will be. So how would we be able to not only deploy that serverless function or any other serverless function, but also be able to get that value? Well, to do that, we just have to run nim project deploy and then period. And so that's going to go ahead and deploy everything, and you will see that the action was deployed, and it says the action name hello. We have this nice little reminder of how to actually get the URL, which is, in my opinion, pretty important. So to get this URL, all you have to do is type in nim action get, and then the name of the function itself, hello, and then minus URL. So let's copy that, paste it into our browser, and you'll see that it says hello stranger. And so you could take that serverless function and you can give it to anyone, and they'll be able to use that function in the exact same way. You can even pass in arguments like question mark name equals Amy. You can do that, and you can see what it looks like in JSON by typing in .json. So that is how simple it is to deploy serverless functions to the cloud. Let's go ahead and start updating our HTML so that we're able to actually call upon it. So every time this page loads, I want a function to be called upon. So to do that, go in between these script brackets here in the code and type in fetch quotes. And then just be sure to make some quotes right there and paste your URL for your serverless function and type .json. At the bottom of here, type in then. Now we need to do response arrow response.json. So what that's going to do is going to take the response and then it's going to turn it into JSON, which we'll need. And then I want to grab that data from the response.json. So .then data arrow curly brackets right here. And so now what I've done is I've grabbed the data. Let's go ahead and apply whatever value that's going to be to this div right here, which has the ID of the number. So to do that, let's do document.query selector. And then I want the specific ID of the number. Do inner.html equals data.body. Go ahead and save that. Now let's go ahead. Now that we got our JavaScript that will actually call upon the URL for the serverless function, let's go ahead and deploy it. See what happens. So I'm going to show you a little trick here. Let's do nim project deploy period minus incremental. So what the incremental tag does at the end of the deploy is that instead of like deploying the entire project like all at once, it only deploys like what you specifically like changed. And that's pretty good if you're building like a very massive application. But like this is fairly small, so I'm not too worried about like a long deploy time. But if you're building like giant applications, that's definitely going to be a tag you're going to want to use. All right, take that URL, refresh the page, and you will see that we have now successfully called upon a serverless function. Now, this is all great. We're moving forward with our APIs, but is it stateful? No, it's not. But we're going to go ahead and build our very first stateful API with just 6 lines of code. So to do that, go ahead and go with the default file right here and make a new file. And we're going to call it, let's call it please count JS. So in please count, I want to go ahead and get started giving that functionality the ability to call upon the Nimbella serverless functions. So to do that, I'm going to go and keep this up in case I get questions. All right. So to do that, I need to call upon Nimbella. So type in const Nimbella equals fire at Nimbella/SDK. So with this right here, this npm package Nimbella/SDK, that is a Node.js library that allows you to interact with the Nimbella services. So we're going to go ahead and call upon Redis within Nimbella itself by being able to call upon it. So to do that, type in const kv equals Nimbella.redis. And remember that key value storage thing I was talking about, that Redis? Well, we have now called upon a Redis within our namespace. So now that we do that, we need to go ahead and extract the data. We need to go ahead and increment the value of whatever like key that we are creating in order to keep track of how many people are visiting the website itself. So to do that, type in const main equals async args arrow, these brackets here. Now let's create a variable that'll keep track of the count. So const count equals await. Call upon our value for Redis, so kv. We need a Redis command that will increment the value that we're going to be dealing with. So that will be inc async. I don't know how to say inc. I think that's how you say it out loud. Inc async. That's probably how you pronounce it out loud. So what we need to do is we're going to be taking a key, and I'm going to call it page visits. So what that's doing is like, okay, go into Redis, find this key called page visits, and increment the value of it. And now we just got to go in and return it. Return body count. Save that code right there. Now let's deploy. Let's go ahead and deploy that with the nim project deploy period incremental. All right, so please count has now been deployed to the cloud. To go ahead and get that URL that we're going to need, we need to type in nim action get please count --URL. All right, we got our URL. Assuming I wrote the code correctly, this will work. So go ahead and write to the JSON, go right here, paste it in. So please count.json. Save. All right, I'm going to go ahead and deploy one last time. Refresh the page. All right. So obviously, I've been using a page visits variable in my key in that my instance of Redis for a while. So obviously, that's gonna be a lot. That number's gonna be a lot smaller for you. But if you did everything right and you keep refreshing the page, you should be seeing that number incrementing with every single refresh. And just like that, you have now successfully built your very first stateful Jamstack serverless application. All right, so, and go ahead, that will conclude my presentation. I will be bringing on Colby here in a minute. Let me just go ahead and wrap it up real quick. All right, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank every single person who followed along and coded with me. It really means a lot, and thank you for every single person who attended this. So if you have enjoyed this session and you are interested in building a Jamstack application and interacting with our community to build Jamstack applications, you can join our public Slack group called at nimbella.com/Slack. From there, you'll be able to share what you're building, ask any of our developers any questions you may have, whether it's either a Jamstack application or any type of application you're trying to build. And if you have any personal questions you want to ask me, please feel free to reach out to me at jamie@nimbella.com. Right now, as a developer advocate, I'm in the process of gathering developers who are wanting to build applications and then help them one-on-one building their applications. And so that way, I can not only help them finish it, but also highlight their work that they can use, that they may be using, that they're building using the Nimbella platform. So if you are interested in building full-on applications using the Nimbella platform, and you would like my help or just kind of where to go, please, I ask reach out to me at jamie@nimbella.com. I'll be more than happy to help you out. And lastly, as a thank you for every single person who has watched this presentation for 3 hours of Jamstack, we are giving you the ability to use the Nimbella Pro version of our serverless cloud platform free for 3 months. You can sign up with this link right here. I'll be posting it in the chat. You can get started with it at any time. And, if you want to start off with the free version, please, feel free to do so. But at any point in time in the future, you want to go ahead and upgrade to the Pro version, you can feel free to reach out to us after you sign up, and we'll be happy to get you set up with that. So other than that, my name is Jamie, and I really do appreciate everyone joining in. All right. I really do appreciate everyone joining in, and I am out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and bring on Colby. So let's bring on our next speaker for the event.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Colby. How you doing, man?
Good, good. How about yourself?
Doing good. I did my best to make sure I wasn't going to go completely over time and, cut you off. So we are good.
Awesome.
So Colby, for people who don't know who you are, why don't you go ahead and give us a little introduction as about who you are?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Colby Fayock. For a while now, I've been doing a lot of work with Jamstack and React and JavaScript, trying to create educational content just to kind of help people learn. My kind of mantra is learn by doing. So I focus on things like tutorials and really try to push educational topics to help push people into actually building things to try to learn. So I'm excited. I'm about to start a position with Applitools next week. So I'm finally a developer advocate, and I'll be doing this full time. So we'll see. Not stopping with the content creation.
Welcome to the club, man.
Thank you.
But yeah, for anyone who is not following Colby on his YouTube channel, I would strongly recommend it. His tutorials are fantastic.
I appreciate
so
that.
Absolutely do that. But yeah, so I'll go ahead and let you have the stage. Let me go ahead and get your presentation set up. All right, Colby, I'll leave it up to you.
Cool, thanks. So, hey everybody, today we're gonna get up and selling with Next.js and Snipcart. So, I already talked about this, but who am I? I'm Colby Fayock. I'm the one hugging BB-8 and Kylo Ren over there. I'm actually about to start next week as the dev advocate at Appletools, and you can find me pretty much anywhere on the web by just Googling my name, as I'm the only one in the world. So we're going to spend some time actually getting a real store up and running. We're going to walk through starting from scratch with the new Next.js app. We'll then add Snipcart so that we can let our customers actually buy stuff. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about e-commerce and the Jamstack. The concept of e-commerce probably isn't new to anyone, but it's simply the act of buying and selling on the internet. Whether you're buying a t-shirt for your favorite TV show, buying some food, or filling a prescription, e-commerce gives us a way to buy things without ever leaving our home. But we're here to talk about devs, so let's break this down a little bit. We heard a lot about what makes the Jamstack great. Phil went over that pretty well. But how does that apply to e-commerce? So showing some images and text on a page doesn't need to be dynamic. Leveraging the tooling we have, we can dump this on a statically generated page and into object storage. We can serve it up right from S3 or Netlify or Vercel. We can even display a bunch of products in a grid. That also doesn't need to be dynamic. There's really nothing necessarily special about how we're putting this page together here. And to be clear, I don't know if Space Cadet, the store that I've been showing here, is static, but beyond a typical content management solution that triggers a new deploy on update, which is pretty common with a lot of the new tools, this doesn't really need to be real-time dynamic. Once we have those pages in storage, we can serve them from a CDN. Those pages are going to get served from locations at least relatively close to them, which makes it snappy. Which means they're going to get served super fast, which is a great thing because page speed directly correlates to conversion rate. So if you're not familiar, conversion rate is the percentage of your traffic that's actually going to buy something on your site. And there's a ton of studies for this, but one I found is eBay, for instance, who found that with a 0.5% increase in their conversion rate, that they got from a 100 millisecond load time improvement. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but eBay's worth over $10 billion. So just as an example, 0.5% of 1 billion is 5 million. So that adds up pretty quickly. And bonus, serving files static on a CDN most likely means less downtime. So there's less of a chance you're going to get taken down by a Reddit hug of death, which could mean loss of money if people can't buy your products. But even with all of that, there still are some challenges that we're left with. Back to our product page, beyond the typical layout, like branding and navigation, we have some critical components of our product page. The image, the title, the price and variations, the cart, and the button that adds an item to the cart. When we're serving those components on a Jamstack site, we talked about how the core of it's going to be static, but some of those pieces need to be highly dynamic in an online store. Parts like the image and title, they shouldn't change that often, so we could probably survive waiting out a cache refresh. Even with the variation selection, we probably know ahead of time what all of those variations are going to be. So that can probably be a static list of options as well. But the price, the availability of that item and its variations, and even the ability to purchase that item, they all need to be accurate when someone is trying to buy it. If the price is wrong, your customers might complain that they're getting overcharged. If someone buys that item and it's sold out, you're stuck with not having enough items to send out, meaning canceled orders and unhappy customers. Fortunately, we have a lot of options. For the parts that won't update too often, we can let them refresh with our typical deploy process. But other parts of the stack, we can take advantage of inventory management, where we can use our e-commerce platform, like Snipcart here, or even homegrown APIs to keep track of that inventory. Anytime an order is made, we're deducting that quantity from our stock with an API request. When the next person goes to check out, the API request can't be fulfilled because the stock is out. So that's going to prevent people from over-ordering our products. All right, so now that we have an idea of what we're getting ourselves into, let's dig in a little bit about what we're going to build. We're going to set up a super simple swag shop. We're going to let our customers buy a shirt or stickers of my famous mascot, Cosmo the Space Jellyfish. The design here is pretty simple. The goal with this exercise isn't to make something pretty, but we'll be able to add products to a shopping cart. We'll be able to view those items in the shopping cart, and we're going to be able to purchase them. So let's talk about the tools that we're going to use. So we're going to start off with everybody's favorite Next.js. This will allow us to get an app up and running super quickly. Then on top of that, we're going to layer Snipcart, which is a shopping cart solution, allowing, like they say on the screen here, the ability to accept international payments in minutes. That sounds pretty great, right? So let's talk about how Snipcart actually works. If we're typically serving a Jamstack site from static storage, we'll be getting a response in the browser, and that's what we'll be serving right to the customer. Layering on top of that, Snipcart runs in the client, so where it will load a shopping cart widget right in your app. Then they'll make any requests to manage that checkout process, allowing you to push customers through a purchase flow without re-rendering the page. This all makes for a really easy install and really easy management. And finally, as a bonus, we'll actually be deploying this to Vercel. So as we'll need it deployed somewhere to fully test out the Snipcart functionality. All right, so are you ready to dig into code? Let's get going. And I will admit this is my first time live coding, so let's see how this goes. All right. This is going to share my entire screen. You can see a couple of me or infinity of me. All right, so the first thing we're going to actually do is we're going to create Next app. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar, Next.js is a React application platform that we'll use to spin up a React app really quickly. So we can do this from the command line pretty simply with either npx or yarn. So I'm going to use yarn for this. And I'm going to start off, I'm going to hide this little widget at the bottom there. Yarn create next app, my Snipcart store. That's going to go through. It's going to install the packages. Ignore that it says Gatsby there. It's because it's a global package that it's using to install the create app. But it's going to go through. It's going to download the dependencies. It's going to install the package, and then it'll be ready to go. So now I can cd into my Snipcart store, run yarn dev, which is going to spin up the development server. I can open that right up. Wait a few seconds for it to load, and we have our Next.js app. So it's as simple as that. All right, so I'm going to actually go to my code editor where I have a little to-do list. So we actually already did this first one. I forgot to check to come at it before we started up the app, but we already created a Next.js app. So the next thing we want to do is actually add some products to the app. So to do this, I actually already have a little JSON document that I started that is going to allow us to not have to worry about fumbling around with a bunch of different product data. So I'm going to go to the command line, I'm going to cancel my server, and I'm going to open this up in VS Code. Cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually copy over that JSON file, create it right in the root, products.json, paste that in. I'm going to spin back up my development server. Now, if I go to my homepage, we can see, like on the Next.js, we see these cards here. We're actually going to just replace these cards with products. So each of these anchor tags here are what creates those different cards. So the first thing I'm going to do is import the products from one level up, products.json. Just to test out that this works, let's console log it out because everybody loves a good console log. A good quote there. We can see that we have our 3 product objects. So let's go down to our cards where we're going to dynamically create each of our product cards. So products map, we'll loop through, and for each of those products, we're going to return a new component, which we're going to use this anchor tag card. We're going to now destructure our title. And just as a reminder, we're getting these properties from our products.json file. So we have our title, and let's grab our ID as well. From product, we can replace the documentation inside the H3 with our title, take the ID, and we're going to need to add a key, a unique value for each of our card components when we're mapping through and creating those components. And we're not going to actually need to link to somewhere. So let's just make this a hash sign for now. But we can also grab our description and our image so that we can add our description. And let's add an image. So a quick note about the image. Of course, they don't come with the app, but it just so happens that I have some images saved on my desktop, which I'm going to drag into the application and make them available. So to do that, I'm going to put them inside of the public directory, which allows us to access those files inside of our application relative to the root. So for example, if I wanted to try to access this vercel.svg file, I can access that at simply /vercel.svg. So I'm going to create an images directory. I'm going to drag these images in where we have our combo pack, we have our sticker, and we have our t-shirt. And we can see that they're already referenced in each of those product objects. So we can now take that image property. We want to make sure we add an alt tag. So for now, I'll just add that as the title. And we can see what that looks like in our browser. And while the images are a little bit big, we'll fix that in a second here. We have all three of our products, which, you know, we're already halfway there, right? So I'm going to go ahead and first get rid of these static documentation cards because we don't need those. And another thing I'm going to do to fix the image size is I'm going to open up the global.css file if it loads. And because Next.js doesn't ship with this out of the box, I'm going to say all of my image tags, image is the right thing, right? Why is it giving squiggly lines? And I'm going to set them so that they can't exceed a max width of 100%, which means they won't be able to grow outside of their container. So as we can see, once I do that, they all shrink back down and we have our 3 products on the page. Probably the last thing we're missing is a button. So let's add for each of these a nice button that says add to carts. And we also want our price because that will be helpful for somebody trying to buy it. And that looks, well, we probably want the $sign. And let's make this to fixed 2 so that people actually know how many cents are on there. Cool. So we have each of our products. It shows the description. It shows the price. And we have an add to cart button that we'll use here shortly for people to buy our site. So let's go back to our to-do list. We created an Next.js app and we added those products to the app. So the next step is actually installing and setting up Snipcart. So back in the browser, I already have snipcart.com loaded. Now you can create a free account on snipcart.com. I already created my account because I didn't want to have to walk through that here with the verification process and the email and such, but this is a brand new fresh account that we're going to be able to walk through. So if we're going down the list of the dashboard of getting started with Snipcart, we can see things like filling in your business information or configuring your domains. We're going to skip those 2 things just for a moment here. We're going to dive in right into the installation documentation. So it's probably helpful to try to figure out how to go through these documentation because that way it'll make it easy for you to grab these snippets in a later time if you want to install this. So as we're going through, the first thing they tell us that they want us to do is grab the pre-connect tags. What this is going to do is provide a little bit of a performance benefit and establish some connections with these domains. So we'll take those and back in our application, we can scroll up to the head component, this is going to manage the tags that we include inside the head, the HTML head of our document. So right below our fave icon, we can go ahead and paste those in. And since we're pasting in JSX, just remember to update those closing tags or else you're going to get a nice error. That was a PHP closing tag. And we additionally want to grab the CSS. It already has the closing tag as we need it. We scroll down, and we also want to include the snipcart.js script, and we're going to include a div that's going to be hidden that we're going to apply our public API key to. So let's first grab this snippet. We can throw it below our footer as far down as we can. And now we need to find this public API key. So if we go back over to our Snipcart account, we can click the account settings up here. We can scroll down to the API keys. And that public key is going to be readily available. I'd like to see somebody try to type that out as I have the screen up. Probably not going to happen, but it's just a test account anyways. I'm going to cancel it. But I'm going to take this, I'm going to paste it into my HTML so that we have our API key there. And if we go back to our app, we can see that if we reload, it's not actually doing anything, which is totally expected, but we can see that it's loading our CSS, our JavaScript, and the other things that Snipcart needs to load. So that means that we're ready to go with Snipcart. So the next thing we want to do is actually add our product information. So if you scroll to the bottom, we can see our adding products to your site. And the first thing they want to do is add some tags to our button attribute. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to set up a class name on our button so that Snipcart can see that button and attach some event listeners to it. But it's also going to apply the product data so that we can let Snipcart know what products we're going to be adding to the cart. So I'm going to copy all of those attributes, go back into my app, and on my button, I'm going to paste those in. Let me break the line here just so it's a little easier to see and read. But once we do that, we first want to update class to class name since we're working in React, but then we can replace all these attributes with our dynamic data. So starting from title, where is it? We want to replace the name with our title. We can take the ID. The ID, I'm not really doing these in order, am I? But we can replace the price, even the image, and our description. And finally, for the URL, because we're not actually creating deep links for our products, for this particular demo, we're only making them available on the homepage. We're going to just leave that as /, meaning that they'll be available on the homepage. But for instance, if we had /product/Space Jelly t-shirt as a link for that particular product, we would want to make that available so that Snipcart can see the product page for that product. So we'll leave that as that for now. Now, if we go back to our app, we can reload the page. And if we try to click that add to cart button, we instantly just added that product to the cart. That was super simple, right? We already have a shopping cart solution and we didn't even have to code up any of this. We just added a few attributes to our page. Cool. So to test that that actually works, we can add another product. So if I wanted to also grab my t-shirt, we still have that cart state and we're ready to check out. Now, if we wanted to be able to have somebody view that cart without adding a product to their cart, we can go back over to the Snipcart documentation, get rid of that Next.js tab. We can go to cart summary, where a few things that they also give us is the ability to have a button that goes to our checkout. So let's first add that. I'm going to just get rid of this description because that's unneeded. What I never added, Space Jelly Store. Class name in React. You can click that and it opens up our cart. And finally, if we want to display the total number of items and the total price of that, we can add those in, replace both of the class name attributes. I'm going to add a breaking point here just so that we can see what we're doing. Number of items, total cost. While it's not pretty, you can see that once we refresh the page, because it needs to load that state in those pieces of HTML, we have the total number of items there, we have the total cost, and as soon as we add an item to our cart, we can see that it just refreshed. All right, so let's go back to our to-do list. Cool, so we installed and set up Snipcart. Now, the trick here, though, is because we're on our localhost server and we don't have this deployed anywhere yet, if we wanted to try to check out, we can get through, we can add our name, hello@colbyfayock.com, 123 test drive, and actually test road exists in York, Pennsylvania, probably not too far from me. But we're given this test number, which is just 424242, which is pretty common for payment processors. Put in a valid expiration date and a CVV of 123. But if we try to place the order, it's not going to actually work. But that's because Snipcart can't actually crawl our page, and we don't have this set up to have our domain actually activated with Snipcart. So we can fix that. Like I said before, we're going to deploy this to Vercel. So let's dig into that. We have our page. It's not the prettiest thing ever, but it's working, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to commit all those files. So git add -m, my ecom store. Now I'm going to go over to GitHub, which I already logged into, but this is just simply GitHub. Let me increase the page speed or size a little bit. Go to a new repository. Let's call this my ecom store. Oh, I already did that. My Snipcart store. Oops, we're good. And we're going to create repository. I can keep this as public because I hope you all want to see this, and I can leave this up for you all to see later. But once we have our repository initialized, I'm going to add that as a remote origin. As you can see, we're already on the main branch, so we don't need to change to the main branch. That didn't copy right. Cool, so we're adding the remote origin, and we're going to push that up to GitHub. And just like that, all of our code is right in GitHub already. So now we can go over to Vercel, where I'm going to first copy the URL of my repository. I'm going to go into Vercel. Let me up the page size a little bit. I'm going to import this project, import it from a Git repository, simply paste in the link to my GitHub repo, which I showed before, hit continue. I'm going to leave it as my Snipcart store as my project name. And because Vercel recognizes that it's a Next.js site, it already sees this framework as a preset where it recognizes a lot of things, whether it's Gatsby or Hugo, or there's quite a bit of options. But we don't need to configure anything additionally because it already knows how to build a Next.js site. So we can hit deploy simply, and it's going to queue up the processes, and now it's going to take our project, clone it down, install the dependencies, build it, and make it available. So while that's going, it's going to take a few seconds here. Let's go back over to our Snipcart page. And the one thing that we're going to want to go back to our dashboard and see is we need to configure our domains. So if we click that, we're going to go over to our domain configuration page, and this is where we're going to make our website a valid link. So once we deploy our Vercel site, we're going to take that domain and we're going to plug it in right here so that Snipcart knows where our site lives. So if we go back over to Vercel, we can see that it's already finished. Congratulations, we get a ton of confetti. It's amazing. But once we visit that, we can see that we now have our website deployed to Vercel. It was that simple. And we can add our items to the cart. It works just like it did locally, which is super awesome. It's still not going to work if we try to check out, but that's because if we take this domain, go back over to Snipcart, let's plug that in because this is where our site is going to live. Let's hit save. Now, if we try to check out Colby Fayock, hello at colbyfayock.com, 123 test road. We put in the payment information, valid expiration date, that wasn't valid, I can't type, 123. We try to place order. We're going to see that it's trying to process that payment, and it was successful. We just completed an order. Now, if I went over to my email account, which I'm not going to show you what my email inbox looks like because it's not at inbox 0 right now, you could see that I just got a successful order email because I just made this order, which is awesome. We literally just accepted an order within, how long has it been? 20 or 10, 15 minutes. But while this is still using the test account, because if we look inside of Snipcart, we're on our test, we can easily make this live with a few configurations. So once we would do that, we would need to fill in our business information, which I'm not going to go through here, but it's something like a business name, which if it's just you can use your personal name, your sender email and such. But once you have all that configured, you can go live, use your real API keys, and you can really actually be accepting payments in no time. Cool. So we just created an e-commerce app just like that. Let me go back to my slides if I remember where I'm at. Oh yeah, okay. Stop that. All right, cool. So back to where we were. So just to recap, we walked through spinning up a Next.js app. That wasn't too bad. We added some products. That's some simple React and HTML and JavaScript. Then we layered in Snipcart, which you saw was just some attributes and a few tags. And we were able to use that to literally sell products with not too long, a few minutes at that. So if you want more resources on either the Jamstack or e-commerce, you can check out my Jamstack handbook book at jamstackhandbook.com, or you can check out an article I actually wrote for Snipcart where I talk about more of the challenges and some of the benefits of React with e-commerce. And there's also a step-by-step tutorial of exactly what we went through today. So if you want the code snippets and you want a little bit of a breakdown of how to do it, that'll be a little bit easier for you. Additionally, if you want to learn how to build your own shopping cart and connect straight to Stripe, I have an Egghead course coming up in mid-December. We'll walk through how to build a shop with Stripe checkout. It's a little bit more involved than the Snipcart solution, where we're going to actually learn how to create a custom React hook and use the context API to create a global cart. But aside from that, that's it. And if you want to learn anything more or want to chat about the talk, you can find me everywhere at Colby Fayock. And I'll tweet out a link of some of the stuff you've seen here today. And thank you, everybody.
All right, Colby, just confirm that you've wrapped up the event.
And I just realized that I still have my old company name on that last slide.
You know what? We're gonna all collectively agree to ignore it.
Okay. Okay.
Just like we've all collectively agreed to not steal your API key, you just put publicly on the video. Like
Exactly.
We're
I would
good,
really
man.
appreciate that.
Yeah, but yeah. So yeah, that was seriously your first time you've done like a live coding session.
Yeah, I've done like a stream with a friend before where I was just a guest and we kind of live coded a little bit, but that was like super low key. So this was my first actual like conference live code. So hopefully it went okay.
No, dude, like I wouldn't have guessed that was your first time. I thought you did fantastic. The speed was good. The code made sense. Yeah, overall, great job.
Appreciate that.
I hope you continue doing that as a dev advocate for your next company for Appy Tools. Is it?
Applitools, yeah.
Applitools. Thank you.
I really got to change that last slide.
It's all good for the next time, man. But hey, you know, we actually have like a little bit more time for questions before we bring on Gift. So some questions I got for you.
Sure.
So you were building an application that you basically would make your own shop for it. So what is the current job market for the Jamstack?
Sure. So I think it's really it depends. I think that's not a great answer, but the thing is with the Jamstack is if you're going for a company that might be like an agency or something that can have the ability to be a little bit more flexible with the tools that you use, like if you get to create a brand new app and you have a company where you can use the cool newest tools, like you might end up using it. Or even if you're on something like AWS where you might already be used to putting files and websites into S3. But that said, there's still a lot of companies like corporate, huge enterprises that still use pretty traditional stacks. So whether it's Rails or even a Perl stack, like my old ThinkGeek team used to use, those are unfortunately not going to be as progressive with some of the Jamstack tooling. But I think we're making a lot of headway, and I think there's a lot of great things that show it and a lot of benefits to it, like the cost savings and the reliability that just make it a really cost-effective way. And when you bring up the term cost-effective, that really helps, lend an ear on some of the corporate enterprise people.
All right.
Yeah. So it depends.
Good answer.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question I have, so this is actually, as a matter of fact, if you people are looking below, you'll see that's the actual link for Colby's YouTube channel. Wanted to go ahead and give a shout out to that. But another question in regards to that, what inspired you to actually make a Jamstack tutorial series for your YouTube channel?
Sure. And it's actually funny that URL, the /user/Colbs, is from like when I first created YouTube in high school, and I don't think I can even change it. So you can also just go to /Colby Fayock if you prefer. But either way, it's gonna work because it's the same channel. But yeah, so it kind of stems from like when I first started teaching things, it came from mapping, because the work I was doing at work was with mapping technology. And I thought it was really interesting how it seemed like there was a huge barrier of entry to that, where it really wasn't too bad if you understood the tools and took a second to try and learn it. So as I was doing that, I was also getting really interested in the Jamstack tooling, just because it made life so much easier for me as a developer to spin up a new site, whether it was like putting something on Gatsby and Netlify. Like it was just so easy to do. And I wanted to teach others how to be able to do the same thing. So that's where I just kind of started moving forward with teaching people how to do that, and that grew into a passion, and that led me to where now I'm going to be able to do that kind of thing full time, which I'm excited about.
Nice. And kind of one final question about like overall your future, because I know you just got a job like a brand new job recently, and so that's probably going to play a pretty big role in like the things you're going to be building out in the future. Do you have any other plans for any other type of like Jamstack tutorial things lined up?
I don't have any like set in stone ones. Really, when I look to do tutorials, I have a huge list in my bare notebook where it's really what inspires me that day. So I throw my ideas in there and I try to look for what seems like it'd be interesting for me to write. And most of those end up being Jamstack tutorials. But that said, I guess the Stripe checkout ecom course that I'm doing, that's going to be out in mid-December, I think that's technically Jamstack, because that'll be a static site. So yeah, I guess that.
Nice. Well, Colby, so that is all the time we have for questions. Anything else you want to say before we go and switch over to Gift?
Thank you so much for having me. The speakers have been great. The event's been great. Looking forward to seeing what Gift has to say.
Nice. Well, Colby, I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
All right, so let me go ahead and get rid of that, and we'll bring on our next speaker. Hey, Gift, how you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. You?
Doing great. This is usually the part where you make the joke, like, saving the best for last, but I really like Colby and Phil, so I don't want to do that to them. But either way, I'm happy to have you on board.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for the people that don't know who you are, will you please give like a quick little introduction as to who you are?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Gift Egwuenu, and I'm a front-end developer. I currently work for a company called Passionate People. What else? I am very active on Twitter as well as YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel where I create technical content and also things related to like career-related topics and my life as a developer. Yeah.
Nice. So I'm very excited to have you start your session. And just like with all the other sessions that we're doing, everyone, if you have any questions like for Gift, like during the presentation, please post them in the YouTube comment chat section on the whichever side it is, and I will be collecting them so that Gift can answer them at the end of her 30-minute session.
Great.
Sorry. All right. So Gift, you'll do me a favor. If you will share your screen, we'll go ahead and get started.
Sure.
All right. All right. I'll leave it up to you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. Again, I am so excited to be giving this talk. Here, I will be talking about two of my favorite technologies, the Jamstack and Gridsome. By the end of this talk, I want people to leave with an understanding of what you can actually do with the Jamstack and also how you can leverage Gridsome to build blazing fast websites. A lot of what I'll be talking about in the first section of this talk, Phil already went through it, but I'm happy to go over them again. And this is just to like show you what or how amazing the Jamstack is. Like I said, my name is Gift Egwuenu. I already said, so I'll just breeze past it. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at LauraGifts_, and also my personal website, giftegwuenu.dev. So I'd like to start with what the Jamstack is. I'm pretty sure a ton of you already know what the Jamstack is because, right, this is a Jamstack conference, but I'd still like to emphasize what it is for people that are not familiar. So the Jamstack is a new way of building for the modern web. And I would like to see it as not just a buzzword because, there are a ton of words out there that people use every day, but I like to see Jamstack as a modern way for building for the web. The Jamstack is basically an acronym. The first, the J in the Jamstack stands for JavaScript, right? JavaScript here simply means that you're handling dynamic functionalities with JavaScript. The fact that this is JavaScript, it doesn't explicitly state that you can only use JavaScript for the Jamstack. You can also use different languages like Ruby and Python. A stands for API, and basically this means that you can access or you have access to third-party APIs that you can then leverage in your Jamstack applications. And finally, the markup here is that your website gets served as static HTML files and is being pre-rendered on CDN. Bringing all of that together, the Jamstack is an architecture that is designed for building fast and secure sites that is delivered by first pre-rendering your files and serving them directly to a CDN, removing the requirements to actually manage servers. Before we actually go into Jamstack, Gridsome, and all the good stuff, I would like to talk about how before the Jamstack came to play, how were we actually building websites. So I would like to call this the traditional approach or the traditional stack. Here's an illustration of how I like to picture this. So initially, or what I would like to call the traditional stack, how you would typically build your website is that most of your code is being rendered on the server side. This means that every time you make a request, you're making a request to the server every single time. And you can also have like databases or web server or application server also running, and you're simply always making a request to the server, which is a very expensive approach, really. And like I said, oftentimes your systems can include like extra databases or content management systems like WordPress and so on. And this adds a layer of latency or slow performance to your website. But introducing a better approach, or this is how I like to see it, the Jamstack approach, how you typically build your website is the Jamstack removes the complexity of having to like always make a request to the server whenever you need to render stuff on the browser. With the Jamstack, the process is much faster and less complicated because you're not executing anything on the server side. Everything is built at build time and is then rendered to a CDN. The benefit of actually using or serving your website through a CDN is that it gets delivered, it's cached, and then it gets delivered to you globally. So in any location that you're based in, for instance, I'm currently in the Netherlands. If I'm trying to visit a website that is a Jamstack website, right, I get it served from a CDN closest to me, which in general helps improve performance of your websites. Why should you build this way? Why actually go with the Jamstack architecture? There are many different benefits of choosing the Jamstack. I will just go over a few of them because I feel like we've already talked about some of this. The first reason is because the Jamstack has great performance. Like I mentioned earlier, your site gets pre-built at build time, meaning that all the files get pre-rendered as static HTML files, which is then served to a CDN. It also has a great developer experience. As developers, we actually enjoy building or working on websites, and we don't want to have to deal or struggle with monolithic architectures, right? Because we are front-end developers, we're supposed to be doing front-end code, not struggling with servers. This is one thing that the Jamstack approach gives to you, because a lot of the things you naturally do on a monolithic architecture, the Jamstack gives you APIs that you can access or you can use to extend the functionalities of your Jamstack application. You have a lot of services to choose from, and there is literally no limit to what you can build. Higher security, yes, means that like I said, you're not doing anything on the server. You actually not running a database of your own, so there is less vulnerabilities for you to deal with. I would like to emphasize what is not the Jamstack. So I've said a ton of things about the Jamstack already, but these things are what you will not classify as the Jamstack: a site built with WordPress, Joomla or Squarespace, a single page application that uses isomorphic rendering, meaning that it's both built on the server at runtime. And finally, a monolithic application that relies on either Node, Ruby, or any other backend language. There is a high chance that you've actually built a Jamstack website in the past without knowing it had a fancy name. This is a fun fact because this was me before I actually knew about the Jamstack. Like Phil mentioned in his session, someone asked the question about what is actually a Jamstack site. A Jamstack site can easily just be a simple HTML file that you are deploying to like GitHub or Netlify. That can also be classified as a Jamstack. So I'm pretty sure a lot of us already use the Jamstack, even though you don't know. I'm just letting you know now. And the ecosystem of the Jamstack is constantly growing. There is a massive number of tools. I'll just breeze past this as well because Phil already mentioned this in his talk. But this is just emphasized to you that there are a lot of things you can do with the Jamstack. Like literally you have a lot of services, headless CMSs to use. There are different static site generators, of which I'll be talking about one today, which is Gridsome. So what is Gridsome? Gridsome is a view-powered Jamstack framework for building static generated websites that is fast by default. I know you might be wondering, why am I talking about Gridsome? If you're already familiar, you'd know that there are other static site generators like Next, Gatsby, or ViewPress. But Gridsome is just one of those other static site generator, but it also offers some great benefits that I'd like to tell you about today. The first one is that Gridsome gives you automatic code splitting. What this means is that for every import that you declare in your code, Gridsome will bundle and serve just that. So you don't have like extra bundles when you deploy your app. Gridsome also follows the PRPL pattern. This is a Google coined pattern, and PRPL is a pattern for structuring and serving progressive web apps with emphasis on the performance of your app. The PRPL here stands for push, render, precache, and lazy load. Gridsome also has a feature called Smart Link Prefetching. Basically, Gridsome has a built-in component called the G-Link component. What this component helps you with is it helps you prefetch internal links on your Gridsome application, and it works with intersection observer under the hood. So if you're trying to navigate to a new page, or you're trying to click an internal link, by just hovering on it, Gridsome already fetches that page. So this basically helps improve performance of your application. Finally, Gridsome also has a very great plugin ecosystem. So if you're looking for ways to integrate different services like headless CMSs into your Gridsome application, there are some plugins that you can actually leverage. The ecosystem of plugins, I like to think about it as constantly growing, because literally every time I check it, there is also always something new out there. Even if you're trying to build something and there is a plugin does not exist yet, Gridsome offers you third-party external APIs. Gridsome offers you APIs that you can actually use to create your own data source plugin or transformer plugin. And I'll show you how to do that later on. And finally, you can also source data from different places. So you can source data from JSON files, from Markdown files, from external APIs, or headless CMSs. The modern web is decoupled and modular. Gridsome makes it painless to build Jamstack websites using data from multiple sources. Like I mentioned, you can source data from content APIs, headless CMSs, and other web services. Now, how does Gridsome work? Before I go into this, I would like to tell you, I don't have a slide for this, but if you're trying to get started with Gridsome, all you need to do is to install the Gridsome CLI, and with that, you can bootstrap or create a Gridsome project. Now, how does Gridsome work? Gridsome has different ways of sourcing data. So you can fetch data through local files or through external APIs, or just local data stored in a JSON file, right? Gridsome has a unified GraphQL data layer. This is where all of the data in your Gridsome application is being managed, and you can fetch it using GraphQL in your view components. Gridsome has two different ways of building or working with your application. So you can work with it in development using the Gridsome develop command, or when you're ready to deploy your application, you can also use the Gridsome build command. And what this does is it bundles your application, builds it into static HTML files that you can then deploy to a CDN. There are some core concepts of Gridsome that are quite important to know about when working with it. I'll go over a few of them. The first one I would like to talk about is the pages. Pages are responsible for presenting your data at a URL. So in Gridsome, when you think about a page is literally what you'd see in your browser. So for instance, if you have an index.view file inside of a page, that will render on the browser as an index.html file. There is also a different concept called layouts. Layouts are components, right, that are used to wrap pages. You think of layout like the components like headers, footers, sidebar that you would use across your sites. Collections are a group of nodes, and each of these nodes contains field with custom data. A collection is useful if you're trying to build a blog or you're trying to build a website that has like different product, like an e-commerce application. I'm going to show you what all of this looks like. Just go through it first. Like I was mentioning earlier, you can use collection to build either a blog, a product, or a tag. And you can source either of these collections from local files, external CMSs, or external APIs. Finally, templates are used to create single pages for your nodes. So when you have a collection, you need a template to be able to render it to the browser or to be able to render it to its own URL. That's when a template comes in. So if you have a post collection, you would also need a post template. And images and Gridsome has a G image component. So usually if you're trying to render an image in a browser, you typically use the image tag, but with Gridsome offers you a image component. And the good thing about this component is it's optimized for progressive image. So the good thing is it always resizes and crops in real time when you're developing. And it's better to use the G image component rather than just using an image tag when you're building with Gridsome. Now, the possibilities of what you can do with Gridsome is endless, and I've only just scratched the surface. You can do so much more to extend the functionalities of Gridsome. I would like to talk about two concepts that would help you extend Gridsome. So if you're trying to build an application with Gridsome and you're thinking of how do I actually create my own data store API instead, like for instance, I talked about the plugins earlier. There are different plugins for you to use, right? But if you're trying to build one for yourself, you would use the data store API. The Pages API, on the other hand, helps you create pages programmatically. I also mentioned earlier that if you're trying to create a page in Gridsome, you typically create a component inside of the pages directory. But instead of having to do that manually, you can also do that programmatically using the Pages API. So I'd like to walk through a very short demo of how to use these two APIs in Gridsome. I'll start with the data store API. So right here, this is a newly bootstrapped Gridsome application. I talked about the pages directory. Here you have components, right? Like this is literally an index.view component, and this renders as an index.html page. I also talk about layouts and templates. But in order to use the data store API, like I mentioned, you would do that inside of the Gridsome.server.js file. The data store API exposes a API.loadSource method. Now, if we are going to try to create a post collection. What I'm thinking about, I'm trying to create a blog, but I don't necessarily want to use content from an external data. I just want to populate data from like a JSON or just a JavaScript object. I can use the API.loadSource method for this. So I'll just walk you through how to do that. First of all, you need to I'll create the post collection. So I can call this const post. And Gridsome exposes this thing called actions. So with actions, you can either add a collection, you can either add a collection or add a node. So here we'd say actions dot add collection. And you can specify a type name. I'm just going to show you an already created collection so you understand or you know what I'm trying to create. So here is the GraphQL Explorer, and with an already bootstrapped Gridsome application, you will typically get the metadata collection, the page collection, and the all page collection. This is from earlier when I was trying to do this. So if I refresh this, you won't see post and all post anymore, but I'm going to try to create that now. So going back here, I can add a type name. Type name here typically represents the name that you would find on the GraphQL Explorer. So this is a type name. And let's see, type name here. Let's call this post. Now, if I should refresh this, let me just refresh this. I just created this collection called post. Now there is literally nothing there, right? But if I want to add data into that, I can then use the add node method. So see post dot add node. Let's create 2 different posts. First post. Just so you don't watch me type the entire thing, I would copy. I'll copy out one that I already have. But what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to create 3 different posts that I can then use within my view component. So yeah, there we go. If I refresh or if I restart this now, now that I'm restarting it, I have to go to the explore page, which is here, and then I refresh it. Right. I still have this. Just to make sure that the data is actually there, I'm going to try to run the query, the all post query. Basically, what I'm doing here is I'm requesting for the data that I just created. And no, I named it post. So yeah. So what just happened is I manually used the Gridsome data source API to create this data you see there, and I can fetch it from the centralized data layer, which is this GraphQL Explorer you see here. Whenever I want to use this inside of my components, all that I need to do is I can use the page query. So with Gridsome, you have something called page query, and I can use that to fetch this inside of my view component. So let me see if I have an example page. No. Okay. So that's typically how you would use the data store API to create or to manually enter data. The other API that I wanted to show you how to use is the Gridsome Pages API. And what this does is it allows you to create pages programmatically. So typically, how you would create a page in Gridsome is that you go to the Pages API, create Pages directory, and create a page. So right now we already have this index.view and about page. But if I don't want to do that, in a case where I'm trying to create a page from like this template, right? Because I want to have like a page with different blog posts, right? I would use the Pages API. So let's walk through how to actually do that. With the Pages API, you typically use the API.createPages method. And here, to create a page, you need to specify the components where the template is coming from, and also you also need to sorry. And you also need to specify the path. So here I am saying create page. And I already created a template here called post.view. Now I want to add the path where that would be. So I would say post rather. The components where it's coming from. The component is located inside of templates and it's called post. So I'll just now if I restart this, I already have an index. I already have an index and /about page, but I don't have, this is the index page. And we have the /about page, right? But I'm about to create a /posts page, and I'm not doing it the way you would do it, like when you create the pages, when you create the page or the component inside the pages directory. I'm doing it programmatically. So now if I refresh, if I restart this and go to /posts, I should see a page, and also there's an error. Components, right? The S. Okay. I'll restart that again because I don't know how to spell. Great. If I should navigate to /post here. Now I see the page that I created, and if just to make sure you see everything that was already pre-existing, all of the pages and the page that I added, I'm going to run this query. This is basically just this is me just running the all page collection. So it will list all of the pages that I currently have in this Gridsome application. So I had the home page and the about page, and I programmatically created the post page using the Pages API. So as you can see here, it exists, and I can also see it in the browser, right? So going back here, these are two different ways that you can actually extend the functionalities or the abilities of Gridsome. Typically, people would just use Gridsome like the way I currently use Gridsome for building their personal blog or building a website. But I just wanted to point this out that there are so many things you can actually do. The data store API allows you to do a lot of things, like I just showed you an example right now. And also you can also do programmatically create pages using Pages API. And this is just a template. There is a website called Built with Gridsome, and it displays a lot of different projects that are currently built using Gridsome. I find this very nice to share and very nice because on this website, you see the different ways people are using Gridsome in their applications or using Gridsome to build their applications. So if you'd like to check it out, I have a link. I can link it, or the link is in the next slide. Finally, in my talk, I really just scratched the surface of what you can actually do with Gridsome. But if you're looking to learn more about it, I recommend you check out the Gridsome documentation. Also, the website that I just showed you is called Built with Gridsome. And there is a community. The Gridsome Discord server is a very helpful community. So if you have any questions or anything, you can find people that would be willing to help on the Discord server. And that brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Gift. Hey, thank you so much for wrapping up 3 hours of Jamstack.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I enjoyed that because I've used other kind of site generators before, but I've not had a chance to use Gridsome yet. So I appreciate you introducing me to something new.
Great to hear that.
Now then, so I do have a few questions lined up because we have a little bit of time for that. So,
Okay.
So overall, like, what would you say made you pick Gridsome over other options?
Okay. At the time when I started using Gridsome, that was last year, I was looking to move from what I was currently using for my blog. I was using Hugo, and I basically like working with Vue, right? I mostly work with Vue, but working with Hugo was like, and I literally had no idea what was going behind the scene because obviously it was using Go. But I was able to find my way around and I used it for like a year. But I thought it would be nice to actually switch from that to use something that is based on Vue that I can actually like twerk and be comfortable in. So I think like the time I was making that decision, there were like a few options available to me, like Nox and VuePress at the time. But I found Gridsome on Twitter, like literally the week that I was thinking about this. I saw a tweet from one of the creators of Gridsome, and I checked it out and I was like, this is literally what I've been looking for. And I think that weekend I built my blog. I switched from Hugo to Gridsome that weekend, and that's how I started using it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and just real quick, just letting everyone know before I move on to the next question. I don't expect everyone to type this out manually, so I went ahead and put a GIF's YouTube channel in the comment section. Definitely would recommend giving her a follow if you're interested in learning about more like having to do tutorials that you want to work with. So another question I got for you. So this is a kind of specific question that's interesting. I would like to know how to add little animations between pages in Gridsome, or let's say in a Vue.js. Do you have any like advice for like doing that, or like resources you'd recommend for that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. I would say with Gridsome, you can also do it the same way you do it in Vue, which is in Vue. Vue provides you with a transition wrapper component that allows you to add animations or transitions to your component. So you can do this using CSS or JavaScript. The transition component, like I mentioned, exposes some classes to you, like venter, vLive, vInteractive, different classes that you can then write CSS for, or if you're looking at using like an external library, I'll also recommend Animate CSS. It's an amazing library that has like different nice animations that or transitions that you can use in your Vue or Gridsome application.
Nice. All right, appreciate that answer. So we got time for like one more question, I guess, before we go ahead and wrap up this event.
Mhm.
So what do you see happening in the Jamstack space in the next 5 years?
Interesting. It's hard to tell what will happen in the next 5 years, but I'll literally say what I see happening now. Now I see that more than ever there is like big, huge adoption of the Jamstack going on right now. My first ever experience with the Jamstack was, I think, 2 years ago, and just from that time till now, I've seen like a lot of adoption from people, just developers like myself, companies as well. And what you can do with the Jamstack today, like it's endless. You literally see like different services popping up, different tools for you to use. And I can already tell you that where the web is going to, Jamstack is also going to be there. Like I don't see Jamstack going anywhere anytime soon, really.
Well, the phrase "I don't see the Jamstack going anywhere" is a pretty good like ending note, I think, for the 3 hours of Jamstack. And I think like hey, you just spent the 3 hours doing something that will actually stick around. So that I think that's a positive note to end on. So before we go ahead and wrap up 3 hours of Jamstack, Gift, do you have any like last words you want to say?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. It was really nice to share with you all about Gridsome, the Jamstack. So thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Well, Gift, hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
All right. So, well, we actually ended like a little bit sooner than we expected. 30 minutes just go by pretty fast for our sessions, but yeah. So that concludes 3 hours of Jamstack. Once again, I want to go ahead and thank all of our community partners who came in and helped us, get the word out, to get signups. I want to thank every single speaker who took time out of their day to be able to come on to this conference, to be able to share their knowledge and help out getting people not only just introduced to the Jamstack, but also helping people just grow as Jamstack developers. And lastly, as I go ahead and wrap this up, I want to go ahead and once again, extend the offers that we're providing. So for starters, if you are interested in building a Jamstack application or need help with it, we will be able to, you can answer any questions you have on our community Slack channel at nimbella.com/Slack. If you are interested in upgrading your free tier of the Nimbella serverless platform, we are providing that as well, which I am also posting the link of that in the chat. So at any point in time, as a thank you for participating in this event, you can sign up for it and have access to, Go Pro. And if you want to talk with me one-on-one about building Jamstack applications, or if you have any kind of questions about using the Nimbella platform to build other type of applications that might not necessarily be Jamstack, please message me. I'll be more than happy to talk with you one-on-one and even go through the process of setting up video calls so we can talk back and forth with each other in real time. So other than that, that concludes it. Again, thanks everyone, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.